It's Tuesday, November 5th, 2013, and you're listening to SYN Boldly, podcast, the Sign Your Name Project. I'm your host, Trey Comstock. With me this week is Stephen Doss.
Hello.
And I mean just Stephen Doss. We believe in clergy self-care here, and so Kathleen is taking a well-deserved mental health day. On tonight's episode, however, we will talk about anti-Semitism in America, Texas versus science, and how Facebook outreach is doomed. But we start with anti-Semitism in America in the news. So the Anti-Defamation League released the results from their annual survey. They do a survey that's kind of a rundown of anti-Semitism in America. And the key, there's a bunch of very interesting statistics, and if you're into this kind of thing, it really is well worth looking at, and they have some nice infographics and really kind of make this work. But from a theological perspective, there's a particular thing that really jumped out to me, and I credit the religion section over at HuffPo for pointing this out to me. Over a quarter of Americans report that they believe that the Jews collectively killed Jesus. Specifically, something like 26% of Americans, yeah, I got that right, 26% of Americans believe that the Jews hold collective responsibility for the death of Christ. Now, this is not necessarily a new concept in Christian theology, but the tide has turned on this from a high-level theology standpoint for a very long time. You know, the Second Vatican Council produced a document saying, hey, this isn't what we actually believe.
Our bad, guys.
Our bad, we messed that up. You know, Pope John Paul was very adamant that this is not, that this is, even Pope Benedict as well, in one of his books, has said, hey, look, this is not actually how this works. But over time, you know, last year, or excuse me, they do this every other year. So in 2011, 31% of Americans believed that Jews were responsible for the death of Christ. That was 29% in 2009 and 27% in 2007. Now, I don't know what the margin of error is, but we got to figure the margin of error is probably plus or minus 5%. This is probably, you know, not changing much. So I guess we know literally right in the New Testament account, some Jews were responsible for Christ's death leading to his resurrection. But what do you, Stephen? What do you think about this doctrine that the Jews hold some sort of collective guilt for this action?
Well, maybe if they just left Jesus more. It's ridiculous. It's this whole mentality that a group of people, a small portion of people who did something very, very, very long time ago, that means that the entire group is at fault. And it's just ridiculous. It's like saying, it boggles the mind how people can just say, like, your entire personage. Hey, look, it says I'm Harrison Thorne here, by the way.
I messed that up.
That's all right.
Good catch.
But I mean, it's one of those where you want to blame someone. You don't want to look at it deeper and see that it's something that happened, and because it happened, X, Y, and Z happens. No, you have to say, like, these people are responsible because they're these people, and because there's a verse in the Gospels that says that, and it doesn't say the entire Jewish population, it says that the people who were in the audience at the time said, the blood be on our hands.
And those people were Jews.
Yes.
And I don't mean...
They weren't all the Jews. There were more Jews than that.
Do you want to know who else was a Jew? Jesus. You want to know who else was a Jew? Paul.
Yep.
Peter.
Yep.
Most of the Bible.
Yep.
Both Testaments written by Jews.
Wait, God wasn't Jewish.
In God there is neither Jew nor Gentile. Look, yes, some of the gospel writers did eventually obviously convert from Judaism to the Jesus movement, which formed into Christianity. Yeah. But I've been in my New Testament class. We're going through the letters of Paul, and one of the messages of Intro to New Testament seems to be, hey, look, New Testament, not actually all that down on Jews.
No, it's not.
Because it's written by Jews, and half of it's written by Jews for Jews.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Gospel of Matthew, which is trying to bridge the gap to a Jewish population living in a Gentile world.
Yeah.
Now, the Gospel of Luke is less Jewish focused, but it was written by people who still saw value in Jewish ways and still identified themselves as Jewish.
Another question that I have from this is, so what's the point? Why do you need to say, oh, they killed Jesus, so they're bad? I can say a lot of people that Christians have killed. And does that make us horrible, horrible people? Probably. Yes. Yeah. Let's just be honest. Yes, probably. But, I mean, the big thing is, it's this... There's a cat and a dog fighting over here. It's distracting me. I'm trying to make a point. They're really getting at it. Anyway, it's the fact to say that the Jews are responsible for Jesus' death. But a lot of people who have that mentality, I wonder what they think about saying, well, what if it was unavoidable? If you believe in some sort of divine plan that Jesus had to die for the salvation of all humanity, whatever you think with that, why does it matter who killed him? If Jesus had to die, Jesus was going to die, and it twain't gonna be an old age.
Right. But to me, it boils down to this idea that somehow the Jews are a separate category from Jesus is somewhat ridiculous, right? Because Jesus was Jewish. And so, yes, some of the Jews were responsible for killing Jesus at that time, or at least as the gospel identifies. None of us were physically there, and so we can't speak to what happened.
That's what you think. I have a time machine.
Sure. But what we've got is the scriptural evidence. The scriptural evidence seems to say that a group of Jews did call for Jesus' death and did arrange for it.
Mm-hmm.
But they were also killing a fellow Jew.
Yeah.
And I think to assert some collective blame, then you need to assert some collective credit. And also, all Christians are responsible for the Crusades.
Well, yes, they were a good thing.
No.
Crusades are awesome.
No, but
so to the Reconquista. That's pretty great too.
Yeah, that was wonderful. But then we're all responsible for the Inquisition, or we're all, if you want to assign collective guilt in one direction, it's a two-way street.
Well, it's collective guilt on others. We don't have to worry about it because it's not us. It's like one of the things that our beautiful, lovely Miss Kathleen Royston always says is, it's not our sin.
Sure. So it's really easy to...
Yeah, it's really easy to say that. Yeah, let's universalize it for something else. Let's call it, those people do X, Y, and Z. We don't. We're better. Yay us. Well, the Crusades, that wasn't us. That was people 1,000 years ago who did that. Well, you're doing the same thing when you say that.
Right, and so this was Jews 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And this wasn't all of the Jews. There wasn't the entire population of Judea was there assembled in the square, and they all said, we don't like Jesus, we want him to die, his blood be on our hands, but that would have to mean that Jesus was also calling for that, and all of the disciples, because at that time they were all Jewish. So is it on their hands too?
That's the guilt. That's guilt that caused them to convert to the one true faith, and...
But that's not even how Paul, that's not even how the evangelists to the Jews are explaining it. They're not like, hey, y'all killed Jesus, you should feel bad about it. It's like, hey, Jesus is the fulfillment of the Jewish law.
Yeah.
And that's their pitch.
Because it's that mentality of you can get more flies with honey that's something that they'll bring up is like you don't want to mention that to them because then they'll get upset.
Yes, because Paul was known for being really subtle.
Paul was very subtle, yes,
and always trying to get his.
If
flies
there
with
was
honey.
something, I'm sure we would have read about it, and all the stuff that's attributed to Paul was like, and he went and he did X, Y, and Z. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. So Stephen, you have quite the gem from us from my home state of Texas.
Oh yes. Continuing the theme of American Christians make us tremble sometimes. This story comes from, I'm trying to think where I read it. It was linked from Deadspin, which is a sports website, ironically, but it is not from Deadspin. I think it's from either Kotaku or Jezebel. One of those.
Kotaku's a gaming website.
Well, it's about science and technology. Well, anyway.
Could be Kotaku.
One of my favorite people growing up that I watched every afternoon on good old APT Channel 10 or Channel 7, because we got both Mount Cheehaw and Birmingham's PBS station, was the one and only Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Bill Nye was awesome. He was super smart, super fun, super funny. Perfect science guy for kids like me. Really got me into science in middle school, even so in high school. Think he's great. That's not the point, though. The point is, Bill Nye was giving a lecture in Texas. I don't know what town in Texas, but Texas nonetheless. And he made the comment that the sun's light reflects off of the moon, causing the moon to seem bright. A lot of us understand that that's true. Trey, do you understand?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
I was about to say, yeah. Do you, Sydney, give me a thumbs up if you think it's true. Yep, it's true. You don't really have to think it's true because it's true. Well, there are some people in the audience. It's Waco. It was in Waco, according to the Left Rev.
Yeah, I've got that on examiner.com too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've been breaking one of my rules. I'm fact-checking on a podcast.
Yes. Anywho, people in the audience got a little upset at this revelation that completely destroys the foundation of the church, and left with their kids from this lecture from Bill Nye the Science Guy. And some of the comments were, I believe one of them was, if I'm remembering correctly, "We believe in God." So, Trey, you believe in God, right?
I do, yes, very much so.
Does the moon reflect the sun's light?
Yes, that's how it lights up.
Well, why do you hate Jesus?
I honest to God, like, I spend, and you can attest to this, and anyone who listens to the show can attest to this, periodically, when I see logic in their argument, even if I don't agree with it, I try to explain that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got nothing. I really don't. I mean, does this going back to some Galileo stuff?
Well, that when the sun rotates around the Earth, the moon can't reflect. Okay, they would run into each other, and then you have angels.
Even in a even if you, for some reason, have an Earth-centric model,
yeah,
which has been refuted for hundreds of years, and I
by
believe
flying into flipping space,
But like, I don't even know if I doubt that's even in homeschooling textbooks at this point. Mm-hmm. But like, even if you account for an Earth center model, which is untrue, even then it's not impossible for the moon to be lit up by the sun, because even then they understood the sun was a source of light. And I don't. So what is it? It's just magically Jesus makes everything move?
Well, I think they're taking, again, a literalist view of the creation story.
Sure.
Yeah, and again, the Left Rev, once again, beating me to the punch. He was referencing the Genesis passage about God creating the two lights. Yeah, And so if you take that literally, there has to be two
So
distinct
116.
lights. Yeah.
Don't ask how I could do that. Okay.
Unfortunately, you can look at that passage another way and get this.
This is really boggling my mind.
You could say that the moon still produces light. It just is light reflected.
Okay, so God made two great lights. They're greater to rule the day, and they're lesser to rule night.
Mm-hmm.
And the stars.
That says nothing about... He just says there's two lights in the sky.
Right. It doesn't...
It doesn't say how those lights come to be lit. It
Right.
doesn't say that there's a series of nuclear reactions inside one of them and the other one reflects from... No, it just says there's two lights.
Right.
You can take... And I'm just going to say this. You can take a literalist view of this creation story and still not be offended when the moon reflects sunlight.
But I still think you're caught up in this, like, why and how debate.
I'm trying my best.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing. But, like, okay, look. I'm not going to be bothered by it. I'm not bothered by evolution. It makes sense. Yeah. Most of the tenets. I understand that even scientifically, evolution is laid up by Darwin is kind of full of it, but the basic principles hold true.
Yeah.
Not 100% of the time and not in all ways, but the basic principle works.
Yeah.
Of natural selection. But even, I don't know. This is just very simple, rudimentary, like, stuff worked out by the Babylonians here, folks. Like, a lot of the kind of work of angles in the sky and the stars were worked out long before us. And, I don't know. Sure, God made two lights. Yeah, there's the sun and the moon, and we're not discounting that. What is simply being explained here is how it lights up.
Yeah.
And that's really it. It's just how it lights up.
Why do you think, Mr. Trey, there is such a... in certain segments of the Christian population, because again, we don't want to paint a broad picture based on one or two people, unless, of course, we're talking about how all the Jews killed Jesus.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, absolutely. See previous segment if you're joining us
exactly.
late.
If you're joining us late, that was a joke. We don't actually believe that. I feel like we have to explain that just in case. Anywho, why does everything have to line up not just literally, but word for word literally in some Christians' mindsets? Have you ever experienced that?
Well, I work in a small rural congregation, and we actually just had a really fruitful discussion of biblical literalism.
Okay.
This sermon's going to hopefully go up on the site soon. I've been really bad about them. But I have a couple sermons on deck, and I think this is one of them, where basically I said I don't believe that biblical literalism exists. Not that I disagree with it, and I also said I disagree with it, but I actually don't think it's real. And I kind of did a Jeff Foxworthy thing with it, and I said, if your preacher is preaching biblical literalism and does not have a long beard, he's not taking it literally. If you're not about to stone me for all the work that I'm doing on the Sabbath, you're not taking it literally.
Yeah.
So, like... And then I held a pastor's Bible study for an hour after church to really give them a chance to ask questions and have this be not just like me saying you're wrong, but like let's talk about it and let's at least find common ground to agree to disagree. And so one of the things I said there was, look, there isn't some big fact out there that overturns faith. There's no one scientific principle that can overturn faith. And I think they hold so tightly on to if this then that, if this then that, then this then that. And there's a whole system of belief built up around science being absolutely full of it and just put there as a stumbling block for our faith. That if you even propose that there's a scientific principle that may be true, it starts to overturn an entire worldview.
Yeah.
Their worldview is rooted in this science stuff isn't real.
Right.
What's real is Jesus. Whereas what I was trying to propose, and I think we both talk about a lot, is that both science and Jesus are real and they're both of God.
Yeah. I know, right, SYN Boldly, Cat? Yeah, the big thing is like, I wonder if, and this is just me projecting, I don't know of anyone who actually believes this. I wonder if there is some underlying mentality that the purpose of science is to disprove everything that we hold dear faithfully.
And that's certainly how it gets approached.
I mean, from a outsider's perspective, that's what it looks like. It's like my faith is being systematically destroyed because of what is going on in the scientific community. And I just don't think that's the case. I think...
Well, I mean, let's be clear. There are scientists. There are, out there... not out there in terms of crazy, out there in the public, scientists who are openly atheistic.
Yeah.
Not even openly atheistic, but like atheistic evangelists.
Militant
atheists. Actively trying to disprove the Bible, which I think is a null concept because, first of all, you can't... Thanks. You can't disprove anything. Yeah. It's a logical fallacy that you can disprove something. All you can do is you can prove an alternative, and they offer nothing. They offer no alternative to a metaphysical reality. So, first of all, they can't do what they claim to do. If someone tells you they've disproven God, I'm sorry. Nope. No can do. It's a logical fallacy. But so I think they encounter those folks, and it seems really threatening. And in this, if you take the Bible literally, science is really scary.
Yeah.
Because it says something completely contrary to what you believe. Right? And this is a slippery slope for all of us. Because I think, to a certain extent, I know very few Christians who don't take at least some parts of the Bible literally.
Right.
And this is another thing I explain to my congregation. For me, what I take literally is I believe in a bodily resurrection. For me, that's where I draw the line.
Yeah.
Of what's metaphor and what's reality. I believe that Jesus physically rose from the grave. Now, there are theologians that will tell me I'm full of it, and I'm being too,
You're being too literal,
I'm being too literal, but for me, that's the line I've drawn.
Yeah.
That's how I understand it. You can take my Genesis away all you want. It doesn't bother me. But for me, there needs to be some sort of physical miracle in Christ. And so for me, that's the line.
Yeah.
But we all have that line somewhere. And it's just, where do you draw that line, and how open are you to understanding the other ways that God communicates?
Yeah. And that line, it should be something important. It should be something that is important. Like, did Christ physically resurrect from the dead? I also think I call it a deal breaker.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
It's a deal breaker for me. I think that, I think that's one of the places where there's not a lot of wiggle room when it comes to something that maybe contradicts a story that I firmly believe is just a people in ancient times trying to figure out just what in the world is going on. That's not going to irk me as much or at all. When someone says, do you know the creation story didn't literally happen?
Yeah.
I say, yes, it didn't. Or, no, it didn't.
But
whatever.
Or also, yes, it did.
Yeah.
But not... Okay, so... First of all, the role of an ancient historian, and I think we mentioned this show before, the role of an ancient historian is not necessarily to explain how things happen, or like the literal events. They are to explain why things happen and give meaning to events. And so the meaning behind the intent of the author to convey a meaning that God created and ordered the universe is true. Or I believe it is. That, yes, God did order and create the universe, and oddly enough, if you trace the creation story and the process of the Big Bang, they check out in really weird ways. In the beginning, there was God, and then
God spoke, which probably made a big explosion.
No, but then the next thing that comes is there's light. Well, light is what escaped and coalesced into matter in the Big Bang, as I understand it. I'm not a physicist, but last time I read about this, that's how they understood it. And so it actually follows like an interesting order, and that's kind of the order in which things happen, which is fascinating. Also, there are two creation stories, so deal with that.
Yeah.
But Genesis 1 and 2 are true. Did they literally happen like that? No, but that's not really what the author's trying to tell us. It's just about drawing a line. And people get caught up in the details of none of this science can be true. And if it is, then where is God? It all just had to happen through magic or the Force or whatever. And nothing can be explainable. But God made us rational and curious. And so why wouldn't some of it be explainable? Or at least us able to start to see some of that divine logic that we see in Jesus, we can also see in physics. How it all can come together in these really weird and interesting ways. And I don't necessarily think that those two things stand opposed. And I just always find it fascinating that people would run or walk out on Bill Nye the Science Guy for what seems like a really minor part of science. Just light reflecting. This isn't even evolution or the age of the earth or any of those like really deeply challenging things. This is just taking one verse, Genesis 1:16, taking it so literally that second light couldn't be powered by the first light.
Yeah.
It's not saying there isn't a moon, there's just the sun even. There are two lights. It's just one gets its power from the other one. And that's all there is. So, on kind of another nullistic point is this week's discussion. So we've been debating technology and church for a couple weeks now. About how these things play in, and I've been kind of taken a position that the technology can be a tool even for worship, if it's used the right way. And Kathleen's probably not going to agree with me.
No.
But we have reached middle ground that perhaps it's possible, but very seldom will it be done well, and I kind of agree there. But it's interesting. You look at a lot of churches are trying to use social network outreach. A lot of churches are. I just unfollowed a church that I used to work for today. Because
congratulations.
I just got tired of their inane Facebook posts about what's for dinner on Wednesday. I really wasn't being inspired. Anyways, whatever. I had to unfollow them. But there's also kind of social networking is going in a very interesting direction. And we think of Facebook as being this new cool thing because it came out in our lives when we cared the most about new and cool things when we were in college or late high school. But for those of us who kind of straddle that line between millennials and Gen Y, which is kind of those of us who are on this show, I'm more towards the millennial end. Kathleen and Steven are more towards the Gen Y end, but we're within a couple of years of each other. For us, Facebook is like the cool thing, right? Now, like everyone's on Facebook to the point where young people are starting to turn away from Facebook.
Yes.
And they're doing a lot more of their interaction on more direct messaging and Snapchat.
Oh, Snapchat.
And Instagram and kind of just other areas. And yet churches are really dedicated to this Facebook outreach and this social networking outreach, whereas young people are tending towards more closed social networks where they can say whatever they want and sext with each other or whatever the kids are doing these days.
They're not watching SpongeBob on their...
They probably are watching
their
SpongeBob.
leapfrogs.
But that probably means something different now. Oh, yeah, dude, I was totally watching SpongeBob last night. That probably means drugs now, and we just think they're watching SpongeBob. But anyway, Stephen, what are your thoughts on this kind of, where the church is going with social networking outreach?
I think it still has a place for now. I think because, a lot of millennials, Gen Y, are still on, it can be great for, outreach to a larger population. I think everyone still will check their Facebook. And the reason we're doing this is because there's been some information released about Facebook that says that teenagers are no longer getting on as much. And they see that as a problem because if teenagers aren't getting on, once people stop using it, then there's not going to be a base to re-up itself. So Facebook will just, for lack of a better word, fizzle away. It'll be MySpace. and then the next thing will get big, and that'll be MySpace, and that's a bit of a trend that they're concerned with. But as for now, definitely a lot of churches, a lot of places of worship, a lot of outreach should be in that Facebook, because how else can you get a large group of people your message? I know we only have 70 people who are like us on Facebook, but it's going up. It'll go up. And also, how else could we reach 70 people all at once? Is by putting a Facebook post. It's up there. It says, hey, we're doing this live, or we just put up the podcast, or Kathleen wrote an article, Trey has a sermon, Stephen accidentally deleted the website. Something like that. It's necessary right now. Now, the problem comes with, like you said, when we're posting stuff that is inane. A lot of times we get into that thing where we think we have to post everything we think of every single time. So you'll get a post that says, hey, join us for Wednesday night supper. And then 20 minutes later you get, remember Wednesday night supper. And then 40 minutes later you get, the menu for Wednesday night supper is this.
Hey, you're describing the thing I just have subscribed from.
I know, and I think that's what it is when it becomes inane. We have such a good opportunity to say, like for us, every Tuesday we say, come watch us do this podcast. And then on Wednesday or Thursday or last week Saturday, because I had my play, I was in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown.
He was Linus. He had a really big role. It was pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. But, you have that once, like, hey, this is up. And then you have, hey, it's up on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We have our new podcast is up. Listen, download, subscribe. Because we don't want to flood you with that inane, for lack of a better, crap. We have a great message, I think.
Sure.
And we want to get that out there. We also don't want people to get turned off by us. And I think that's the problem with when you beat people over the head with stuff that doesn't really matter. Because it's gonna come up anyway. It's like.
But I also think it's interesting that we talk about kind of generational technology, right?
Yeah.
And so here we are. We have a website, which is, by the way, the generational technology of 10 years before us, when it was really cool. Oh, I have a website, man.
At least we don't have a blog.
Well, we sort of have a blog, but like...
Oh. Dang it.
Yeah. But we have a website, but then we also use the technology of our generation. So we use Facebook.
Yeah.
And I have an email address, which my dad started using in the late 80s.
Yeah.
So, technology... So maybe Facebook isn't the cool place, but I'm willing to bet that most of the teens have a Facebook.
Yeah.
And most of the teens I don't think I know a teen that isn't on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it may not be where they're doing all the really cool stuff, but just like I had email when I was a teenager, even when all the cool stuff was happening on my stuff and AIM. What? Because it was all happening on MySpace and AIM. What?
Back when we had names like Big Dog.
and let's remember LiveJournal. Did you have a LiveJournal?
I did not. We didn't have internet until 1998.
I was in high school, and I had a LiveJournal. And so, yeah, and I had an AIM. So, we still have email, and I still use email. I'm looking at my email right now. It's right in front of me. And I also use Facebook, and I also use instant messaging. That's how this show gets planned, is on instant message every Tuesday afternoon while we're at work. That's weird. Hopefully our bosses aren't listening. Mine might be. So I think there is still a place for Facebook outreach, even if it's not the hip, cool thing.
Yeah.
It has 1 billion users.
Yeah.
And that user number is still growing. The growth has slowed down because, look, there's only so many people with computers.
Mm-hmm.
But given there are only so many people with computers and the internet, it's still growing. And so I think there's still going to be a place for Facebook 10 years from now. I think it's one of those tech companies that, can stand the test of time. Mm-hmm. I've been reading a book about Amazon this week called The Everything Store. And it's, Amazon's been around since the early 90s, right? And so it's grown into this huge thing. It's another one of those tech brands that have lasting power. We think of tech brands, oh, they're so up to date, man. But like Microsoft's been around since the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, Apple, the 80s. Amazon, the 90s. Google, the late 90s, but still the 90s. You know, Facebook, yeah, early 2000s. But so many of the tech products and the stuff I do a tech show, Tech's Last Call at techslastcall.com. This is something of particular interest to me. But tech companies that really have that kind of huge presence tend to stand the test of time.
Yeah.
And so I think there'll be Facebook 10 years from now. There may even be Facebook or something like it 20 years from now. And our kids will make fun of us. Oh, man, you guys, your church newsletter's on Facebook? That's so lame. Just like an email newsletter is like kind of lame now.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't like, oh, we need to abandon Facebook because that's not where all the cool kids are. Yeah, but a whole lot of 20-somethings are there. You know what our churches could really use? They could use youth. They could also use a lot of 20-somethings. And college students, way too much time on their hands.
Yes. Yeah, but again, the problem is it's that what do you want to keep people up to date, and so you assume that we have to go through every little thing repeatedly, and that just and then you have people like, you know, the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings that aren't looking for that. I mean, people always say like, this is what millennials want, this is what millennials want. Well, as a millennial, this is what I want. I want to be left alone with the small crap. Give it to me once, I'll see it, especially if you've got something inspiring or something that's relevant to me as your post that comes out. Like, I would love to like hear, you know, hey, check out this super cool Bible verse or this inspirational thought from a leader that we don't really talk about that often, that we found that we think is relevant. And then, you know, that gets me there, and then it's Wednesday night supper, we're having chicken tetrazzini. Something like that. Bring a covered dish to Billy's house. Well,
I think those kind of posts misuse the internet. So I wrote my undergraduate thesis on how the internet can help start political revolution. And the way you analyze a network's power is how its ability to connect people. And what's so cool, so like a telephone is a one-to-one connection, right? You call one person and you're only talking to one person.
Yes.
What makes the internet so powerful is it can build groups, huge groups that can connect and talk to each other. And so if you really, here's the big secret to social media. The big secret to social media, okay, it's twofold. A, make it funny. B,
sorry guys,
start a conversation. What makes the internet, and what makes social networking, which gets called Web 2.0, we're in a later stage of Web 2.0. But the second round of internet technology is its ability to connect people to other people independent of space and time.
Yes, and cat videos.
And cat videos. Like I said, make it funny.
Yeah.
But start a conversation. So, sure, go ahead. Post about chicken tetrazzini. Throw out questions for people to reflect on the sermon. Like we were talking about the other week for live in worship. Maybe you don't do that live in worship, or maybe you do.
Yeah.
But you offer the chance for people to connect to each other and build community. Use the internet and social networking as a place to build community. And that, I think, is how you actually leverage its power, rather than just having it be another way instead of posting a bulletin board. The internet can be so much more than a bulletin board, and so seldom gets used as that. People will go where the conversation is. And I think that's the secret to the internet. That's the secret to all your web stuff. Start a conversation. Don't talk about going viral or, you know, what are my number of views.
We're going to do a whatchamagiggle, one of those dance videos.
We're going to do a viral marketing campaign. If the word campaign is the end of viral marketing, you're done. But start a conversation and maybe it'll go viral. Maybe it won't. Mm-hmm. But the power of Web 2.0 has very little to do with being a bulletin board system. That was the 1990s and the 1980s, where you had BBSs, which are bulletin board systems. Now we can have people connecting in Christ, independent of space and time. That's how you overthrow governments with the internet, and that's how you actually use the internet to build the kingdom of God, which itself is a revolution.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to end it.
And on that note, it is time to end. And on that bombshell, it's time to end. Thank you very much for joining us on this week's slightly abridged edition of SYN Boldly, or SYN Broly.
SYN Broly,
bro it up. Yeah. If you want to be a part of this conversation, as we've just been talking about, please email us, podcast at SYN, that's the other show, SYN Boldly at SYN Boldly at endfear.org, facebook.com/the Sign Your Name Project, or at SYN Boldly on Twitter. Also, this show is available after the fact at endfear.org, where there'll be the video version and the audio version, or you can subscribe to the audio version on iTunes. And go in peace to love and serve the Lord and end fear by signing your name. Good night. This one, disgruntled